Hello, and welcome to your weekly episode on Shadow Space. If you are on a healing journey, a self discovery journey, or perhaps just into personal and self development, you have definitely found your show. On this show, we like to take deep dives and explore what it means to do the shadow work and also talk about the hidden aspects of our personalities, the parts we often keep buried for reasons that may be known or unknown to us. Kind of juicy, right? Well, I invite you to stick around and find out what this is all about. But in the meantime, I'd like to formally introduce myself. My name is Laura Brown. I am your host, and I am a certified trauma informed coach, as well as a breathing and meditation coach. Shadow Space was inspired by my own personal struggles through my healing journey that I've been on for a number of years, that I'm still very much on, and all of the discoveries I've made about myself. Listen, some were great, others, not so much. But I've learned the value of integrating every bit and part of these aspects of myself by working through the shadow. So I wanted to create a platform where we can bring these topics to the light, no pun intended, but kinda, and really talk about these often perceived weaknesses, insecurities, unconscious patterns, behaviors, and what have you, that can sometimes hinder us and keep us stuck in life. For anyone who's been on this journey, this path can be very difficult to navigate and sometimes isolating and really lonely. This is how I felt most of my journey. So I wanted to build a sense of community where we can come together and hopefully openly share, support, and empower one another. But most importantly, also learn and feel inspired by each other. That's really the purpose of my show, is to really help you understand that you are not alone and that you are capable of more than you can ever imagine, and nothing is inherently wrong with you, despite what your mind, thoughts, and beliefs may suggest. Okay? So I hope you guys continue to tune in often, and I hope you guys continue to find inspiration through my journey. And I'm also curious about yours, so please do share with me as well. All right? Okay. All right, everyone, here is your bonus show, as I promised, on self-discovery. And as I said earlier in my previous shows, I had this recorded and I just had some challenges with it, but I just wanted to be able to share this with you guys because I've been, on a hiatus the last couple of months, and it's just been a little bit up and down in my personal life, and I'm, trying to find my bearings and get my life all in order. So you guys deserve the show, and I wanted to share it with you guys. So today I want to take a deep dive into self-discovery, a topic I've actually touched on almost all my previous shows, I believe. Just sharing my personal experience through my healing journey and how that has led me into self-discovery and my path of self-discovery, as I'm still very much on that path. I'm still very much on my healing journey. And if you guys listen to any of my previous shows, you know that I always like to say this is a journey that evolves over time. And it's quite literally a journey that also is never linear. It continually changes and continues to unfold. And I think along the way, you're always surprised by all of the discoveries you make along the way. So I wanted to take a deep dive into the process of self-discovery as it relates to the shadow and also as it relates to healing in general, and how you may find yourself on this path, especially if you're traveling kind of a similar journey right now. So I want to start out by first things first. I think one of the biggest challenges we all experience when it comes to self-discovery is the idea that we already know who we are to a certain extent. And I believe that is true for all of us. We do know who we are to a certain extent. But I think what self-discovery does that is so unique and so beautiful is that it reveals more of who we are. I don't believe it necessarily shows you any parts of yourself that didn't already exist. Rather, I think what self-discovery does is that it shows you different layers and aspects of yourself that you may not be aware of and perhaps had masked so well, just through your own life, right? Through your life experiences, through any circumstances that you had to deal with, or perhaps, life challenges you had to overcome. I'm of the believer. I'm a believer of that we wire ourselves, right, based on our life experiences, based on all the things that we've been through and the things that we have learned to survive with. So if you've had a challenging life in general and challenging upbringing, you probably have learned to adapt to live in that way. You've learned to survive according to the circumstances that you were dealt. And I think what self-discovery does is it reveals, these areas of yourself that were masked by your conditioning, right? By the programming that you were running with, and by just what you've had to live with, what you've had to survive with, how you've had to cope, how you've had to adapt and be who you are today. And this is why I think the self-discovery journey is one of the most crucial journeys that will transform your life completely, and that will eventually lead you towards the path of true fulfillment. But it's not that easy, because I think most of us resist the idea of discovering more of who we are because of just what I said earlier, because we all, to a certain extent, already feel like we know who we are. And I think that is a valid thing, because most of us do know who we are. And for me, for example, if you had told me back when I was on my healing journey, I just began the journey, I should say, when I didn't really know what was going on and I didn't understand all the deeper meanings that I do now, if you had told me then that I was going to discover more of myself along the way, I probably would have thought you were crazy, because to me back then, my true self back then was the only person I knew to be me. I didn't know myself to be anything other than who I was back then. So the idea that I could become more of myself was just not something that was, feasible, or something that I could even imagine or envision. So therefore, I feel that sometimes we have to go through certain challenges in life in order to be pushed towards this path, right? And sometimes, like my mentor used to say, the guy I like to call my mentor, I shared with you guys in my previous episode, Michael B. Beckwith, he used to say something like, pain pushes you to grow. Okay, gosh, I think I'm saying this wrong. He used to say, pain pushes you until it leads you to an insight. Something to that effect. I have to research and come back to you guys with his exact saying, because I don't want to butcher it. It was so beautifully said, and I think that's what pain sometimes does for us. Like if you've ever had a difficult circumstance, something that was even extreme or tragic, for example, you might feel like your whole life is falling apart. And I find myself, even after I have learned this process through my self-discovery and healing journey and all the shadow work that I do, I still find that to be very, very much true. And I think as human beings, sometimes we can't reconcile the idea that pain can lead us to a breakthrough. Because truly, when you're dealing with pain, or you're in a painful situation, or you're experiencing a lot of, challenges and obstacles in your life, that actually, the feeling of that supersedes everything else in your life. So you could not imagine anything good coming out of that situation. And I think for all of us, most of us humans, I speak for most of us humans in my personal experience, I think that is what where we get stuck, rather. And so what self-discovery is the pathway that says, look, you might have gone through some challenging, difficult times, but there's a purpose for why you are going through what you're going through, because it leads you to discover more of who you are. And that is so special and so magical in so many ways, because it doesn't mean that you can't exist without being on a path of self-discovery. So I want to make that clear. You can, right? You can live a life without having to go through self-discovery necessarily. But is that life full? Is that life fulfilling? Is that life meaningful? Is that truly the life that you've always wanted to live? Is it the life of your dreams? And so this is what you have to ask yourself. Now, for me and my circumstances, I did not initiate the self-discovery journey. I did not actively seek it out. It was just something I was led towards and guided towards, that I'm eternally grateful for, because it continues to change my life every single day. But I do believe you can certainly start asking yourself these deeper questions, and not necessarily have to be in a situation where you're guided to it. Meaning, there are so many tools and resources now that you can begin to do this work, independently, and you can begin to take these initiatives and start to look at areas of your life where things may feel different or difficult or tight or stuck, and start to do this work for yourself. And as I shared in my previous episode of self-exploration, these are the tools you have at your disposal now. You can begin a self-exploration journey, right? You can begin to do this deep inquiry. You can look at yourself, and you can do the shadow work. These are all tools, right? You can empower yourself with, to begin to do the inner work, the introspection, because the process of self-discovery is just that. It's a process of introspection and self-exploration that allows people to uncover their true self, right? And when I say true self, I mean yourself without all the masks, without all the layers, your true self, your whole self. And as I shared many times on my podcast, as it relates to the shadow, these are the areas that sometimes get highlighted for you, right? The layers that you have disowned, and these layers can be ugly. These layers can be, just not what you want to accept about yourself. Because who wants to accept anything other than good about themselves? Sounds a little ludicrous to tell people go on a journey and discover all these ugly parts and all these parts that are repressed, all these insecurities and the things and the uncomfortable feelings and all these things. Sounds a little crazy to tell people to do this work, but there is a deeper purpose, right, for the shadow work, and as well as the self-exploration. And so self-discovery comes with that process of doing the shadow work, doing the introspective work, doing that self-exploration work, right? It involves taking deep dives into your thoughts, perhaps, your feelings, desires, motivations, and like I like to say now, because I know this from experience, self-discovery is an ongoing process. It's not a one-time thing. Whereas when you're talking about self-exploration, you can really intend to explore, let's say, your emotional state. Perhaps you want to explore a little bit more about your triggers, and what makes you act or react a certain way. So I think that process is a little bit more individualized. So you can really just focus on an area of yourself and do that deep dive and find out, right, certain things that you're perhaps curious about. And that's the cool thing about self exploration is it invites a level of curiosity. And I shared that in my previous episode. So if you guys are interested in my perspective on that, feel free to go back and check out that episode. But so self-exploration invites that level of curiosity that helps you perhaps pinpoint certain things about yourself that you are interested in working through. Whereas I think self-discovery is just an ongoing process. It continues to evolve and unfold over time. For me, this has been true. There's been parts of my life now when I reflect back to when I started, when I said, if somebody had told me back then that I would discover more of myself, back then, that's who I thought I really was. I was like, this is me. This is all of me. This is what I'm familiar with. This is who I am. This is what I'm comfortable with. This is all I know. And so there's nothing more to me but this. That's the way I saw things. And then once I went through my healing journey and started doing shadow work and, all this introspective work and the deep dives and just self-exploration and all the things that come with this very important work, that's when I realized all of these different layers were there. And some of these things needed to be addressed, and some of these things were uncomfortable, and some of these things are still unfolding in my life as I speak. Some of these things are still here, very much present in my life, and I'm still working through them. And that's why I say self-discovery is very much an ongoing process. So with that in mind, I think you can definitely initiate the process for yourself, because it helps you really define your true self too, right? It helps you understand your values, your needs and wants. And it's so funny because you can even get down to like, okay, the foods you like or dislike, things of that nature. But it's really the process of understanding your true self without any inhibitions, right? Like your darkest, most, whatever. Oh gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? I had a word in my mind and it just disappeared. But I want to say like your darkest, weirdest, quirkiest desires, things like that, right? Your needs and wants, and like just in an ideal world, who are you and what would you be? What would you want to be like? And who are you and how do you define yourself? What are your core values, right? What do you envision for yourself? If, for example, somebody gave you a blank canvas and said, paint your life. Here are your brushes and colors. What would you pick? Right? What would you pick? Like without anybody's opinion or insight or input, what would you choose and why? Who are you at your core, right? If you were accepted exactly for who you are, who would you be? So that's what self-discovery brings to the light. And it is a process that is just so beautiful as it evolves over time. But let me say this, it's not pretty, not always pretty. There are times through the process where the things you don't want to face, right? The shadow aspects of the self that emerge, that show their ugly head, will show up. And those things are very, very challenging to deal with. They can be very uncomfortable because for me, when that started happening, that's when I realized all the compulsive behaviors I had created to escape them. I was like, oh yeah, this is not a comfortable feeling. I don't want to feel that. I don't want to touch that. I don't want to look at that. So therefore, I'm just going to find any and every distraction to make myself not feel that thing. Working and overworking is one of those things, right? Like for me in my previous career, it was insane. It was total insanity. Like I was multitasking to levels that were just not humanly possible. Now that I reflect back on it, I did it, but back then it was like just you were on high stress and high alert 24/7, nonstop. The world of sports never stops, and that's what I did, right? And so, but that couldn't afford me the space to dig through anything. But enough of that accumulation of that stored stress led me to that breakdown that I had, and then led me on this path. So then I began this journey. But what I'm saying is, I think when these ugly parts come up, we can find any and every compulsive behavior we can come up with or imagine to get away from the uncomfortable feeling. The feelings can be very uncomfortable. They can be very intense. So it's not always a pretty process. It's not always an easy process. But I think for me, what I will say that can be helpful to somebody if you're on this path is to invite a level of openness to it. Like, invite and allow the openness in your life, right, for this journey, because there are so many plot twists, there are so many curveballs, there are so many detours, there are things that you just could not script, even if you were the best movie director in the world. There are just things like you couldn't script. Right? There are so many plot twists. There are so many things. There are so many things that come up. So I was fortunate enough to be open to the journey in general. And so whatever came along with the journey was just like, okay, what's next? Okay, what's next? Oh, that doesn't feel good. But I'm here. I'm going to do this. I signed up for this. Well, I didn't intentionally sign up for it, but I'm here for it, is what I said to myself, because, hey, sometimes you don't have a choice. You're just ushered in this direction, and you receive that guidance and you follow through that guidance. And that's how I was moving. And so allowing yourself that level of openness to know that, okay, this journey is not easy. It's not linear. And you might encounter a lot of different things that you didn't expect along the way, but they are here for a purpose. Like, self-discovery is designed for a purpose, for a bigger purpose. And to me, it's also designed on purpose. So 2 different meanings there. I believe self-discovery is for a bigger purpose, right? To reveal more of who we are and to allow ourselves to show up, to have the courage to say, okay, this is me. This is the whole me. I may not be approved of this way. I may not be liked this way. I may not belong to, the society I used to belong in this way, but this is who I am. And I have to come to a level of acceptance with this version of me, right? And so that purpose then leads you to something bigger, because if you can act from this place of authenticity, all of you, your true self, then anything and everything that you create from there is meaningful. It's impactful. And it's not just meaningful for others. So again, you take away that need for external validation goes away. It's meaningful for you, which brings you a completely different level of fulfillment, right? So that is the bigger purpose, in my perspective, for self-discovery. And this is why the journey is so ever unfolding, ever evolving, because it's not instant gratification. You don't just discover the thing and then you're gone, because in my opinion, there would be no value in that, right? If you were just to discover all of who you are today, there will be no purpose, right, for you to be here in this incarnation. I think you go through experiences and life challenges, and then it shapes you and molds you, and then you become more of who you were always meant to be, who was always within you, by the way, like I said. But then you understand. So then when you look back at the journey and you go, oh my gosh, I can see now. I can see all the dots. I can connect the dots. I know that I had to go through this to become this, and I had to experience that to be here. I had to acquire this to navigate that. I had to do this. And, and then you look back at the journey with a different level of gratitude, right? So pain all of a sudden becomes, your teacher. And then you're like, oh, wow, I am grateful to have gone through that challenge because it made me become who I am, right? More of who I am. And these are things I didn't think I had, right? And the saying is so true when they say, you don't know how strong you are unless you are tested. And so it's the same concept, right? With self-discovery. It's like you look back and you go, oh my gosh, I didn't know I could overcome that. I didn't know I was equipped to do this. I didn't know I could navigate that. I didn't know I had all this within me. Well, you always did. But in survival, right? And I will talk more about trauma on this podcast. I want to start bringing my trauma series to you guys. But you begin to understand how you have been wired, how you wired yourself just for the mere reason of surviving and feeling safe and existing and coping as a result of life circumstances and life challenges. And that is what is talked about a lot in trauma. And that's really what kind of interested me in learning more about trauma as well. So self-discovery has two different meanings, in my perspective. It's that the purpose is revealed, right? Your purpose, your bigger purpose, your mission in life gets revealed over time. It's ever unfolding, ever evolving. But then I also think it's designed on purpose because, like I said, it's meant to help you shed the layers that you have acquired and the mask that you have been wearing that prevented you from seeing yourself truly for who you are, right? We all have personality, but personality is not who we are. Personality is what we've built for the world to accept us. It's not necessarily our true self. Right? So personality to me is, oh yeah, you find somebody, oh, they're so likable, they're so funny, and they're so, this, and they're so outgoing and what have you. But then behind closed doors, that person might not see themselves that way. They might say, well, I'm kind of like an introvert. I'm more shy. I don't really like social gatherings, but I've built up this personality that is completely opposite of that. So I operate at that level when I'm out, but then behind closed doors, I know that that's not who I am. So then I'm having trouble reconciling these two things. Well, what self-discovery leads you to understand is that these layers that you have built, right? The masks and all the things that you wear, they're not you. But it's okay to be you. It's okay for you to show up as your true self. Yes, it might feel unsafe in this world and extremely judgmental society we live in. I experienced this myself. Because let me tell you, the more free-spirited you are, the more you become a target of people who want to see you fit in a box, right? You're not the ideal person when you show up as somebody who's open-minded, who can see multiple perspectives, who's perhaps, a free thinker. And I don't like to label myself at all, but that's what, you people see you as. And then you become this challenge for the world in this society that wants everything to be predictable and precise and the same. So yes, it can be very challenging to allow yourself to show up as your true self, because our society wants to condition everybody to act and behave and think and do the same. And if you fall in that trap, then you become a part of that, right, tribe, where you're just following status quo. But we're not here. We're not here to just follow status quo. We're here to shatter the status quo. And not to just shatter the status quo to shatter the status quo. I think we're here to really express our true self, our authenticity, to be who we are, openly, freely. I mean, gosh, what is wrong with that? What's wrong with somebody being who they are, right? What's wrong with somebody's ideologies and beliefs and, desires and wants and needs being different than someone else? For the life of me, I could never wrap my mind around why that would be wrong and why that would be threatening to others. I couldn't. For me, it's impossible for me to understand that, because I don't just champion people to be who they are. To me, it's the most natural way to be. But I also wasn't aware of myself until I began my journey, because I was anything but my true self. I was also trying to fit a mold to fit in. And I was always struggling with that self-acceptance and self-esteem and self-worth. And it wasn't until this happened that I started to do this work and realized, wait a minute, wake up. This is what the purpose of it was. And this is why I say self-discovery is designed on purpose as well, because we have to get to a place where we understand that we are worthy and we are more than enough exactly as we are, regardless of people's opinions, judgments, and projections on us. We have to understand on an individual level, each one of us, that we are more than enough as we are, and that we don't need to be liked by everybody. In fact, we might not be liked by anybody. Hey, I've come to accept that. And it's the most freeing thing you can ever do for yourself, because you stop the needs of wanting to people please, to belong, and to be validated. You stop all of these things, and you start to actually orient your life in a way that is meaningful and purposeful for you on an individual level, specifically for you. And that is where true empowerment comes in. This is where true fulfillment comes in. This is how you begin to show up as your true self, your authentic self, your whole self, unapologetically. But you will be fighting battles, my friend. You will fight battles. Let me tell you, you will fight battles, because it invites a lot of scrutiny when you are that way. It's just not comfortable for people. People are very uncomfortable with people who are comfortable with themselves, right? Have you guys ever noticed that? You could be minding your own business, walking your own path, staying in your own lane, and people still find it challenging to accept it. And this is why I say the path of self-discovery is the most crucial part that transforms your entire existence. Because when you know who you are at your core, when you know what's important to you, when you know what's meaningful to you, when you know that you are living in your truth, nothing else can shake that foundation, regardless of how many people project onto you or hate on you, for example, or dislike you or think you're full of shit. I've been told that. I've been told that I'm full of shit. Anything of that nature, regardless of how many people tell you any of these things, you will stand in that truth that is very, very empowering. And that is very powerful, because that is what self-discovery is meant for, is to know yourself and to reveal all of the things about you that make you who you are uniquely as an individual. And when we can all have the courage to show up like this in this world, that is when the society becomes a new society. Because guess what? We're all contributing to the society we talk about by not actively taking, our steps in our individual lives to make the changes that we want to make, or that we desire to make, or that we're afraid to make. We're all contributing to that quote unquote toxic societal norm. That's what we're all doing. But when we take that back and begin to do our work on an individual level, then guess what? We empower others to be able to do the same. And then we change, right? We change that societal norm. It becomes a new norm. So we can all contribute. We can all collectively contribute, but it has to start with us individually. So I really encourage you guys who are on this path, no matter how difficult it gets, no matter how confusing it gets, no matter how many plot twists gets thrown at you, stay on it. Stay on it. There is a bigger purpose for you that is unfolding, and be open to the idea that something huge is emerging for you, and that you have a big impact, and that you as an individual can make a huge difference for the collective as well. Okay? All right, guys. Well, this brings us to the end of the show. I hope you guys enjoyed it thoroughly. And if you did, don't forget to rate it, and don't forget to like it as well. And don't forget to follow me on all my socials. I am on Instagram at Shadow Space Healing, as well as TikTok, Shadow Space Healing, or you can visit my website, shadowspacehealing.com, for more information. And I will be here later this week for you guys with another brand new episode and a new show. All right? So I'll talk to you soon. Bye.